Hello and welcome back to my studio. Today I'm going to be announcing the winners to my Painterly Workshop Lucky Draw. To celebrate my 5,000 subscribers, I thought I would give away 5 places in my Painterly Workshop. This is the self-starter program where you work through the course in your own time. And now let's pick the 5 winners. Okay, the 5 winners are Rome Blooming, Beverly McElnulty, Dee Draws, Cheerful Simplicity, and Mark Begbie. Congratulations to all of you. I'm going to be in touch with you in the next couple of days, and you're going to soon be joining me on the Painterly Workshop. I hope you enjoy it and you get a lot of benefit out of it. Right, now let's get on to this week's lesson, and I thought this week I'd go through some of the questions I get from artists. Go through those and maybe give a few useful tips, not only for whoever asked the question, but for you as well. It might be something that you are struggling with. All right, let's dive in and start with question 1. Okay, let's look at the first question. This one comes from Carol. I've just watched your video using thick paint. My question is, if we wait for the underneath layers to dry before we paint another layer, will this affect the painterly look? I think I have become a stingy painter because of the cost of the paint. I want to change my mindset. Okay, I think this is probably something that bothers a lot of artists. First of all, I kind of work with a small palette of colors like this, so it's not going to be terribly expensive to keep up with these colors. I can mix most of my colors with them. One of the tips that I like to give is also to paint on a smaller format, and that really does help to develop the painterly approach, because you can use a number 6 or number 8 brush and really get big shapes on a small surface like this. So that's one way to learn how to paint in a painterly fashion. Avoid the really big paintings. It's much harder to fill up that space and make it look painterly. Okay, if you wait for the underlayer of paint to dry before putting another layer on, is this going to affect the painterly look? Well, it shouldn't cause any trouble to the painterly look, provided you do a few things like, as I said, using a larger brush and just paint big shapes. But typically you're going to be starting off with a fairly thin layer, maybe using a little bit of white spirits just to get an early block-in done. Just getting your big shapes and a composition established. Now if I let that dry and then come back into it with larger brush strokes and thicker paint, that's not going to cause any problem. And you can get in your thick and juicy layers whether the surface is dry or wet. Okay, but if you do have, for example, progressed in the painting and then you leave it for a week and come back to it, you're going to find that edges have dried up. And that is one of the problems with letting a painting dry. It becomes harder to manipulate edges. When they are wet, you can smooth and soften just using the brush and get some loose edges, etc. So that definitely can influence things detrimentally if you need to work edges and they're all dry. An example of that would be this painting over here. It's completely dry, but I haven't actually finished it. It's more of an abandoned painting. If I wanted to come into it now, really what would I have to do? I would probably end up painting the whole thing over again, because I can't work into any of these edges. They are all dry. Everything in the painting cannot be worked. It is for all intents and purposes, this is just a primed panel, and I have to start again. If I had completed the painting, say 99% done, and I just wanted to add 1 or 2 marks to it, that would be okay. You know, I could go over it. Since the bottom layer is dry, I don't have any risks of cracking paint or anything like that. So yes, then I could definitely add in like that. I would only have a few things that I'd want to do. There's pretty much nothing else I can do. I can't mix into those colors, change them. And I find it very difficult to come back to a dry painting and rework it. My preferred approach is to work wet into wet fairly quickly, and to try and complete a painting before it is completely dry. That way I can work the edges and maybe change a color, and I could mix in a bit and just get a light green by just adding some yellow and things like that. So you can certainly profit working wet into wet. Next question is from Johnny Blaze. It says, regarding local color and shadow, if I have a red apple in warm light and I wanted to create its shadow color, that is the core shadow, not a cast shadow, would I mix a new cool red, add cool green and a touch of cool blue, or would I use the warm red, that is the original light color mix, with cool green and a touch of cool blue? Okay, that's a good question and quite a complex one. So let's just have a look. So the core shadow that Johnny is talking about would be this area of the painting, would be this area of the apple here, light coming in from that direction. And let's just mix up a quick warm red using some red light. Let's call this the local color, red apple. So light coming in from right to left. And let's just increase the light effect. Now the light side of the apple will give way to indirect light and start cooling down. This would be warmer with the yellow light hitting it. Getting to the indirect light here, maybe there's some reflection up into it as well. Now the shadow that Johnny is talking about, you've got a couple of options here. I always have a cool red on my palette, like alizarin crimson. So if I took alizarin crimson, mixed it with the red light, that immediately makes it darker and cooler, the alizarin being a cooler red. So that might be an option there, and it's certainly not a cool red in a sense of a real shadow. So you could go to blue, and get a very strong and dark shadow. So let's take some blue over here, let's take some red, put those two together. Okay, so there we get very strong dark. The other option Johnny mentioned is green, taking the cool yellow lemon, some ultramarine blue, and mix that with the red light. Now there I've got in effect a green, and if I blend that in a bit, I'm also getting very strong shadow. Both are going to give very strong shadows. What if you just mixed up a green and left it pretty much in the green family, just with a little bit of red in there, and mix that in. So some apples you find have got a sort of greenish yellow ochre maybe tinge to it, and that may be the right look. But in all times you've got to observe your subject. So if we're just talking about a straight shadow for the red, I would prefer to use blue, cerulean blue. Went over it. Yeah, that would be probably too dark, except in a very harsh shadow. So, you know, you would get the right value you need. If you add white, it starts getting into a sort of dirty violet. Maybe that would look right, but I would prefer to just keep it fairly clean. So cerulean, the red, and get my shadow that way. So step one for me would be to work with blue, blue being the color of shadow in warm light. Well, I enjoyed answering a couple of your questions, and if you have a question, please send it to me. You can leave it in a comment, send me an email, whatever, and I may be able to have it on the show and demonstrate the answers for you. Well, if you found this useful and enjoyed this video, please remember to subscribe if you haven't done so already. If you can give the video a like and a share, that would be fantastic as well. Well, enjoy your painting, and we'll see you next week. Cheers for now.